All right, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Socialist leaders around the world are making moves, flexing their authoritarian muscle, and getting downright desperate in recent weeks. And we want to talk about why that might be. We have some stories from North Korea, we have some stories from Venezuela, and we have some stories for Brazil. So buckle up because we're going globe hopping to various socialist utopias in episode 464 of the In the Tank podcast.
Guys, do not listen to the In the Tank podcast. It is a dangerous show of dangerous men with some dangerous malarkey, and I do not stand for it. All right, where's my Vice President, Condoleezza Rice?
All right. Hey, y'all. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. We're specifically, broadcasting to our friends down south. Yeehaw. So I'm just going to talk like I normally do. What cowpoke do we have joining us here today? We've got Jim Lakely. Sorry, I've been doing debate prep with Kamala Harris, and this was rule number one. Talk like your audience. So Jim, how's it going? VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you today?
I really don't even. I had a nice thing to say, something kind of funny, but I can't after that. That was complete surprise, and I am shocked and horrified, and as I'm sure our listeners are too. But actually, I do want to assure all of our viewers and listeners that this podcast, is not secretly financed by Russia or Russia Today. We do not have any fake made up people that are supposedly investors somewhere in Europe giving us money. We don't have like 17 shell companies from which to shovel in and filter foreign money for this podcast. So this podcast is listener supported. So if you are so inclined, if you like this stuff, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and help support us because unfortunately, unlike others, we don't have secret Russian sugar daddies.
Yeah, that's true. Most of our funding comes from Senegal. I think I'm pronouncing that right? Steven Senegal. He's our number one backer. Also joining us, we have Chris Dalgo, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Steven Seagal, one of my favorite actors, because guess who he's actually good friends with? No kidding, totally serious. Vladimir Putin.
Oh no!
Look it up.
It all circles back.
True.
Oh, what? Dang it! I thought we were safe.
That really blew up in your face, Tony. That really did.
Oh, Justin Haskins, senior fellow for the Socialism Research.
Tony, is there something you want to tell us?
It's all blowing up in my face. It is.
Forget it, Donnie. You're out of your element.
How are you doing today, good sir?
I don't know anymore. I thought I was doing okay, and then I came on the show, and now suddenly, I don't know where things are going. I don't know where I am anymore. I don't know why we're doing this. Honestly, it's like we don't need to get into the whole Russian thing, but I guess what confuses me so much is who are these people that think it's a good idea to take money? Like if Russians approach you and they offer you money for anything at this point in time, who is thinking this is a good idea? Like, even if you're just like, well, I don't know, maybe they're going to help out with the marketing and whatever. Like, who thinks this is a good idea? Does anybody? It's just, I just don't know what these people are thinking. I really don't.
Well, okay. So the references for people that are not in the know, because I think this is just breaking as of within the last 24 hours of recording this. There is a story coming out, a DOJ indictment about some people related to conservative media that were taking tens of millions of dollars from Russian financiers.
I think it was 10 million.
Just
One
under 10 million. Yeah.
Okay, just
One
millions
10
of
million.
dollars, right?
Yeah.
But the details are still very hazy. We're not sure who is in the know about this and who were victims and all of that. So, we're gonna not talk about it this episode.
No.
Maybe
I got to talk about this a little bit real quick because Merrick Garland held a press conference yesterday with the FBI director right by his side talking about Russia, and how Russia's interfering in the 2024 election again. So they apparently think that we're so stupid that we're going to buy the Russia lie again. And guess what so Donnie, I actually read some of the material that they used, and they literally said, yeah, there were like 32 websites that were, basically spouting conservative talking points about, record inflation and that kind of stuff. And that's Russian disinformation. No, it's not. No, it's not at all. The amount of, campaign election interference going on inside the United States of America far outweighs anything close to what Russia could be doing meddling in our elections. I mean, it's the Twitter files and all the misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, just all this stuff that is having a humongous effect on American elections that dwarfs anything that the Russian government can do with a couple bots and a couple poorly designed websites and just on top of the conservative commentators who are apparently paid by Russia. Well, it's according to them, they were not directly paid by Russia, and they were just, paid by a benefactor, and they were paid to write what they were going to write anyways. So it's not as if they were given Russian talking points and said, hey, go write at this and, change your mind. No, they didn't do that. So this has been so blown out of proportion. And I can't believe we are doing Russia redux. This is insane.
All of Chris's talking points are coming from that Steven Seagal money. Jim, you were going to say something?
I wish, man.
No, just this comes in the same week in which an actual paid Chinese spy who was the, I think, deputy chief of staff, if not the chief of staff to the New York governor, Kathy Hochul. She was indicted and charged with crimes because she's a actual paid spy by the Chinese Communist government who is in a high level in the Democrat politics with the Democrat governor of New York. So I think that might be a little bit more serious than, this kind of farcical Russian influence operation allegedly through a new conservative, streaming network on YouTube and Rumble. I mean, it's kind of a joke. I mean, there is foreign influence in our elections and in our government. And by all accounts that we can see, it's the Chinese government that is infiltrating very high parts of our government, including sending a honeypot, Black Widow type spy to jump in bed with Eric Swalwell, congressman from California, who was on the Intelligence Committee. It seems that kind of serious stuff doesn't really get talked about. It's just, it's a one-day story. It's no big deal. But yeah, they're going to make a big deal about alleged Russian interference in the election. If you read the indictment from the DOJ on this whole thing against Tenet Media, the only people charged with any crimes is actually not even the Tenet Media Company people, let alone the influencers that they had hired to produce content for Tenet Media. None of those people, no Americans are charged with any crimes. They just charged the two Russians who were operating this whole thing. Again, I actually encourage you to read the indictment. It's not hard to find. It's kind of almost farcical, this is like Boris and Natasha stuff from Bullwinkle at some point. But only those two Russians were charged with any crimes. And, the Department of Justice might as well have charged penguins in Antarctica with crimes because there's as much likelihood of them coming to the United States to face justice. But, the great Molly Hemingway from The Federalist said on Fox the other day, a very true thing. The one government in the world most guilty of improper election interference in American elections is the United States government. And it is not close. As Chris mentioned, the Twitter files and all this stuff, and maybe this does segue into some of the topics we're going to bring in today. But the idea that Russia was somehow influencing the election through this scheme, or that, buying Facebook ads or Twitter ads or sending out bots on Twitter is affecting the election is farcical. China sending spies to infiltrate themselves very high up in powerful government positions in the United States is a real threat and very serious. This kind of other stuff is a joke.
You know what interferes with elections? Throwing your opponent in jail in the middle of an election. And that is exactly what the Democrats are trying to do at this very moment. So I don't really know how anyone can care about anything in the context of that. Like, what difference does anything else make? If there's only two candidates that have any chance of winning, and one of them is on the verge of going to jail months away from, just a couple months away from the election, or a few months away from the election, and the people trying to put him in jail are the allies of the other candidate running for president, who is in a position of power right now. I mean, all other talk about election interference is sort of pointless when that's going on at this very moment. So,
well, I will say just a little bit of a kind of counterpoint to any of this, that I am kind of disturbed that Russia is funneling millions of dollars into our kind of media system in whatever way, and whoever knows what. It's still kind of disturbing to me, but I think there's still a lot to come out on that story, and maybe we'll do a future episode on just the idea of misinformation and propaganda and all of that sort of stuff, especially in the lead up to the election. But
who do you think Russia and Vladimir Putin want more in the Oval Office, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? I think it's blatantly obvious they want Kamala Harris. So this whole notion that they are in support of Trump makes no sense. Well, Trump, what did Trump do? He said no to Nord Stream 2. What did Biden do? He said yes. I think that Donald Trump also had a foreign policy that put Vladimir Putin in his place, but the Harris-Biden administration obviously has not. So that's kind of just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and maybe we'll discuss it further in a future episode. But we got a plenty to talk about in this episode. Like I said, buckle up. But for those audio-only listeners that are catching this show probably on a Friday or later, you can join us a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are live streaming this on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. And you could join the conversation through your comments and questions in the chat. Maybe we'll show your comments on the screen. Maybe we'll address your questions on the fly. You can also support the show, not by super chats on YouTube, because we have been demonetized, but you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate directly to the show. And that way, that money you send will go directly to the show and not be taxed at a clip of 30% by YouTube. So that is a great way to do it. Also, hit that like button, share this content, subscribe if you haven't already, leaving a comment. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms and prevent content like this from being shown to more people. But we got a lot of stuff to get into, so let's get into it. The other day, I was looking for topics to talk about on the show this week, and Justin and I noticed that there was a number of stories surrounding some of the world's most prominent socialist leaders. And I already wanted to talk about the story of the Brazilian president, Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, and the ongoing feud with Elon Musk and Twitter, or X. So I decided maybe we should dedicate the entire episode to covering a whole host of these stories from our collectivist friends from around the world. So the first story I want to get into is comes from Venezuela and their leader, Nicolas Maduro. So Venezuela, probably not breaking any news for anybody on this, but just to kind of set the context of the story, Venezuela has been going through pretty significant political and economic and social challenges over the past long time, but certainly it's increased over the past 5 or so years, 6, 7 years. The country has been plagued with hyperinflation since 2017, massively eroding the value of the currency. The inflation peaked in 2020 at a rate of nearly 3,000%, and they've since wrestled it down to a mere 190% as of 2023. But this massive inflation has already thrashed living standards and the economy of Venezuela. So bad that the government has already started introducing new denominations of their currency, the bolivar. In 2021, the Central Bank of Venezuela announced the introduction of 3 new banknote denominations: the 200,000 bolivar note, the 500,000, and the 1 million bolivar note. See, it's this is the socialist miracle. Everyone gets to be a millionaire. You might not be able to buy bread with that $1 million, but, I digress. Politically, the country has been on the edge for a while, specifically since the 2018 election between Nicolas Maduro, the kind of heir to Hugo Chavez, and Juan Guaido. Maduro won the election, but many viewed the election as being fraudulent. And Guaido declared himself the interim president. He was backed by many Western countries, including the United States. However, Maduro still retained control of the military and many of the country's institutions. And Maduro also benefited from international support from Russia, China, Turkey, Iran. So he ultimately remained as president of Venezuela. Last month, Venezuela had another election, which was again beset by claims of fraud and corruption. A large group of countries are calling for a third-party review of the election, while the country's Supreme Court has already awarded Maduro as the winner. Limited audits that there have been about the votes in certain jurisdictions has showed double-digit leads for the opposition party, but again, Maduro was deemed winner. So citizens in Venezuela are living under precarious political and economic conditions, leading to millions of them fleeing the country, while those that remain suffer under massive shortages of basic goods and whatnot. So what does the good authoritarian leader do to restabilize his country? He encourages his citizens to celebrate Christmas early. That is right. Maduro announced his this week plan to move Christmas to October in a bid to distract the public from ongoing political turmoil. Following the latest disputed presidential election, Maduro went on TV on Monday saying, quote, "It's September and it already smells like Christmas. That's why this year, as a way of paying tribute to you all and in gratitude to you all, I am going to decree an early Christmas for October 1st. And one intelligence analyst told Fox News that it's more evidence that he is desperate to distract people from the fraud he committed on Election Day and the horrible repression that has been seen in the months since. So, Justin, Christmas in October. Don't let the right-wing media tell you that living under a socialist regime is all bad. Am I right?
Yeah, how can you argue with this? I mean, this seems like a pretty good move to me. I mean, they love Christmas in Venezuela. I mean, they're poor and they can't afford anything, but it's the spirit of the season, which of course isn't in this season, but in a future season, they're trying to capture the spirit, bring it back in.
That's right.
To the fall. So my question is, what does this mean for like Halloween? Do they do Halloween there? I don't know what they do in Venezuela. Does this mean Halloween is gone? Are we swapping them out? Yeah. Are we going to do Halloween on December 25th? That's my question.
No, that gets brought back.
No,
too,
Justin,
so
here's the big question. What is this going to do to the pumpkin spice industry in Venezuela? Seriously.
Oh, good question.
You know what? I haven't thought about the ramifications of this at all. It might help.
Straight to peppermint.
Frankly, it might help it. I don't know, because now everyone just gets pumpkin spice for the holidays. It's maybe that's who's behind this. Maybe it's big
Starbucks.
Pumpkin.
Starbucks.
Yeah, it could be Starbucks, could be Big Pumpkin. I don't know, but somebody's behind it. I think I seriously do wonder, though, is the plan to celebrate Christmas again in December? Like, I mean, legitimately, I don't think the media has asked him enough questions.
Tough questions.
The tough questions. This is just so. The thing I love about Venezuela is the gift that keeps on giving to the rest of the world, not to its own people. In that case, it's horrible. But to everybody else, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's the cautionary tale that this generation needs for why socialism is truly the biggest dumpster fire idea in the history of ideas. It is the worst idea ever. And Venezuela, every time the left starts kind of drifting back into openly acknowledging that they're socialists, because many of them are socialists, but they don't like to openly acknowledge it all the time. Whenever they start drifting into this, something horrible happens in Venezuela. And all of a sudden they're like eating their pet rabbits because they can't survive, and you have like just the most, zoo animals being slaughtered because there's no food available, obvious like election fraud, people fleeing by the millions, it's just like some horrible thing happens in Venezuela. You can't buy toilet paper. These are all real stories, by the way. I'm not making these up.
Oh, yeah.
And like, And you're forced to be reminded that, oh yeah, socialism is a dumpster fire idea and it's terrible. And nobody wants to call themselves a socialist because then they have to associate themselves with that. And for most of the 20th century, we had the Soviet Union. Like in America, we had the Soviet Union. Everyone could just point to the Soviet Union, or they could point to China and they could say, look, everybody, the Soviet Union, do we want to be like them? No, obviously not. So we probably shouldn't go down this road of socialism. And everyone was like, yeah, that's a good point. Like you didn't really need to do much more than that.
Sure.
But then once the Soviet Union collapsed and about 10 years went by and everybody stopped remembering about the Soviet Union, you had this whole new generation of people that were little kids when the Soviet Union happened. All of a sudden that wasn't like a problem anymore. It wasn't a boogeyman for that generation. And now at this point in time, you're like you're talking, you're decades removed from the end of the Soviet Union. So you need a new cautionary tale. And the Venezuelans have provided that service to the entire world.
Right.
Like it is a total train wreck society. And one of the most important things to remember about Venezuela is it wasn't always a train wreck society. This is often left out. I think people think Venezuela and then they just sort of assume, well, it's always been a poor country. So no, actually, it was one of the wealthiest countries per capita in the world at one point in time. They are blessed with vast oil reserves. They have lots and lots and lots of wealth that comes in as a result of that. And the real source of their more recent economic woes came from the government really mismanaging badly their oil companies and oil reserves, all of which has been nationalized and everything. And so this was an incredibly wealthy country on the way up 60, 70 years ago or so. And now it's just a total train wreck. And it's because of socialism. Right. So as sad as this kind of thing is for people who live in Venezuela, and it is obviously horrible, it really does serve the purpose of warning the rest of the world that, yeah, these ideas, they are, it's not just that they, are slightly less efficient than free market capitalism. It's that they lead to people like starving in the streets, fighting over toilet paper, not having to kill their pet rabbits for protein. Like it just leads to absolute insanity. Yeah. And the government, this is the last thing I'll say, the government's reaction, and this is also a cautionary tale about socialism. What's the government's reaction? Well, maybe we should, let's change course. Like this isn't working out. Nope. Their reaction is to come up with like insane gimmicks as ways to like, they're not going to admit they're wrong. They're not going to do that. No. Instead, let's move Christmas. Let's move Christmas up a few months. That'll help us. Like, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, but this is socialism.
Chris, let me preface what I'm about to set up for you with an acknowledgement that our inflation that we've experienced here in the United States is terrible, leading to the increase of price of groceries and energy and cost of livings, all of that sort of stuff. But we're talking about like 10-15% inflation rates here in the United States. I have to like reread this because they were talking about a peak of 3,000%. I mean, that just doesn't happen without just like colossal mismanagement of everything going on in that country. I mean, this is some crazy stuff going on down there.
Yeah, I mean, like Justin said, it's a really sad case because not that long ago, a couple decades ago, Venezuela actually was on the brink of, being a prosperous country again. And unfortunately, Hugo Chavez nationalized the oil industry, and it has caused all sorts of problems, and the people are paying the price. And it's not as if Maduro and people high up in the party are paying the price. No, of course not. It's the people at the bottom of the ladder who are really having to deal with the repercussions of these. But Donnie, I've got some breaking news. Do you know what he also announced?
Oh no, is this a relocation of Easter?
No, he's got 3 specific economic proposals. Okay. Price controls, and then especially for grocery stores because they're price gouging.
Oh, it's price gouging.
He's also going to give $25,000 to everyone to buy a new home. Okay, And then he's also going to give $50,000 to everyone to start a new business. Oh, whoa, I'm sorry. That was actually Kamala Harris's economic agenda released just this week.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You confused. I'm sorry about that.
I was
Excuse
going
me.
to say, you know, the
One more-
grocers in Venezuela are charging $1 million for a loaf of bread. So,
It's true.
you
Well,
know, I
not
thought
dollars.
bolivars. Jim, so since the latest contested election, Maduro has issued arrest warrants for his political opponent, Edmundo Gonzalez, who many around the world think was the true winner. Human Rights Watch says that security forces and pro-Maduro groups have killed 23 protesters because there was a rash of protests after the contested election. Maduro government is accused of cracking down on protesters, carrying out arbitrary detentions, thousands of arrests, prosecutions, and a campaign called Operation Knock Knock, which encourages people to report relatives, neighbors, and others who participated in protests or simply cast doubt on the election results.
Oh my gosh, this sounds like the United States during COVID and after the 2020 election.
Yeah, I thought maybe your mind would go in that direction. But,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on what's going on in Venezuela?
Well, as Chris and Justin were talking, I was thinking that, you know, that old saw that you can vote your way into socialism, but you're going to have to shoot your way out.
Mm.
You know, let's back this up a little bit. It's not just that, you know, some people thought that maybe that election wasn't on the up and up. Pre-election polling showed Maduro's opponent at 65% to Maduro's 31%. And even the Carter Center, which goes around the world monitoring elections, you know, said that, you know, and is actually not all that stringent sometimes. Let's just say it that way. The actual results of the election were 67% for Gonzalez and 30% for Maduro. And Maduro just declared, no, those results are, I don't know where you're getting those numbers. I won. That's it. And so, you know, some people in the comments here, one of our regular viewers, Christine Laurel, had mentioned that, you know, if you're Venezuela, as Justin said, and Christine did in the comments as well, there it is right there. If you can't be a good example, be a horrible warning. And that's what Venezuela is. Let's also remember that Hollywood leftist luminaries, a parade of them led by Sean Penn, used to go down to Venezuela and bask in the glory of South American socialism with their buddy Hugo Chavez, and I'm sure that they visited Maduro as well. And they come back to the United States and they use their amazing celebrity and leverage that they have and influence they have among people and talk about how wonderful it is that they've gone to visit such a beautiful and just country that cares about its people. And then, you know, so it's amazing the PR that people volunteer to do for socialist hellholes like Venezuela. And again, you can vote yourself. This is a cautionary tale. You can vote yourself into socialism. You can decide that it's better to have a government that is your daddy and takes care of you. But you're not going to be able to ever vote your way out of it. Venezuela, I mean, 63, when people talk about a landslide in the United States, they're talking about maybe 53 to 47 or something like that. Or, you know, that would be a landslide in the United States. This was the people of Venezuela have had enough. And even though they tried to rig the election, obviously, in every single way, disqualifying lots of other candidates, they have to put on a patina that they live in the wonderful socialist utopia that people like Sean Penn are convinced exists. So they have to run an actual election. When Maduro loses by, what did I say again? Was it 69? I'm looking it up again. 67% to 30%. When you lose by that sort of a margin, and you still declare yourself a winner and move on. And then, I'm sorry, the story was from Fox News. Even Western press, which should know better, kind of covers this stuff as almost a joke, that to distract from the strife in his country,
Right.
You know, strife created by starvation and by having their human rights violated at every single turn, and to have an election absurdly overturned and just having the dictator for life, Maduro, declare himself the winner. to distract from that, he's talking about it smells like September, or it's September and it smells like Christmas in the air. It doesn't smell like Christmas. It smells like tyranny, and it smells of bullshit. And distracting. And it is funny from our perspective. It is funny that Maduro, of course, socialist leaders have ultimate and plenary power over their entire country, so they can do something as silly as declare that, we're moving Christmas to October 1st in this country because we want to have a celebration. And to have it covered really is kind of a distraction, almost funny. And like I said, there is something funny about it. But under all of that is a country of misery that too many people in the West make excuses for, if not outright celebrate. And to put on top of that, they would like to have a little bit more of that here. And there are elements of what happened in that election and what happens in Venezuela that are actually happening in this country, including trying to put your political opponents in jail.
Yeah, I think there's some kind of overarching themes that we can draw from a number of these stories, but let's save that a little bit. I think the comedy derives from just the absurdity of all of this. As we pointed out, the crazy repression of the political opponents and all of that, and the absolute economic chaos. And then what's the solution? Oh, let's have Christmas early. It's just crazy, right? But let's move on to the next story here.
But Donnie, I gotta say one thing here. Since I've been a kid, it seems like Christmas does keep coming earlier and earlier and earlier.
Yeah, do you know who's in favor of this? The malls. The malls are like,
I was gonna say,
yeah.
you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart or Target these days. What is it, September 5th, and it's like they got the Christmas decorations up.
That's
so
right.
I think that he's actually just borrowing that idea from those evil capitalists.
Yeah, right. Next year it'll be in August, so it'll just keep working its way back every year.
Sure, why not?
All right, let's talk about the ongoing story in Brazil with Elon Musk. So this story actually started like a couple of months ago. Brazilian President Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, I'm just going to call him President Lula from now on, and the Supreme Court of Brazil ordered that X remove a bunch of profiles that were considered to be spreading disinformation. They also demanded that X name a local legal representative to oversee Brazilian issues with the platform. I haven't been able to find a list of the accounts that have been ordered off the platform by President Lula, but it appears as though most of the affected users appear to be prominent supporters of the leader of the opposition party. Bola, how do you say that guy's name? Bolsonaro? Is that how you pronounce it? That's how I'm going to pronounce it from now on. These accounts have been accused of spreading defamatory fake news and threats. And after Bolsonaro's election defeat in 2022, for inciting demonstrations across the country. So after a protest at Brazil's capital, the Brazilian judge that seems to be at the center of this whole story ordered Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, TikTok, and Instagram to block accounts of individuals accused of inciting these protests. Elon, committed to fighting for free speech on the platform, told President Lula to buzz off, saying that he's not going to meet these demands. So Brazil's response, they have since moved to ban X in their country, originally signaling that anyone that tried to access the platform through a VPN or any other kind of back channel way could face daily fines up to $9,000. It is important to note that the Brazilian audience on X is not insignificant. There was an estimated 20 million users of Twitter X from Brazil. It's also important to note that Lula and the judge have a history of supposedly muzzling free speech and engaging in political persecution. Lawmakers from the Bolsonaro circle have been imprisoned, and supporters have had their homes raided. So, Justin, I'm going to go to you first on this one. What are your thoughts on this? We have some people spreading misinformation on a social media platform. Let's ban the entire thing. What do you think about this reaction from the Brazilian President Lula?
Well, I mean, this is in essence what the left wants in the United States for all of us, isn't it? I mean, I don't really see the difference. They want, if they had it their way, the government would go to social media outlets, they'd go to search engines, they'd go to other, websites and news outlets, and they would say, if you're spreading misinformation, then you need to stop. If you're allowing other people to spread disinformation, then you need to stop them. And if you don't, then we're going to fine you or shut you down and stop you from doing this. And of course, the whole problem with all of this is there is really no way of accurately defining what misinformation is, because how do you, it's all in the eye of the beholder in a lot of cases, right? Now, on the ones that are really clear cut, that's the stuff that the left likes to focus on at first. They like to say, well, what about, people who just say the Holocaust didn't happen? Like, and they win some people over with that kind of argument. But in reality, the kinds of things they have attempted and colluded with social media companies in the past to stop are not cut and dry cases like that. For instance, the Hunter Biden laptop story that came out immediately before the last presidential election. And we now know for a fact that the Department of Justice, that the had been pressuring X or Twitter at that time, and Facebook and others to prevent people from sharing that information. And we now know that the Biden administration had been pressuring social media companies during COVID and the lockdowns and things like that to silence various people talking about the efficacy of vaccines and COVID-19 and that kind of thing. And so we now know that this stuff has been going on for a long time in the United States, but courts have consistently said that those activities are, at least to some degree, illegal in the United States, and that the government really shouldn't be doing that. And even if they do it, it has to be purely in an advisory way. They can't actually impose it on people. But in places like Brazil, where you don't have freedom of speech in the same way that you do here in the United States, all bets are off. But this is exactly the world that the left wants here. And that, I think, is really the most important thing we talk a lot about slippery slopes and that kind of thing. And it's this thing that's been said over and over and over again. And so people kind of ignore it, but it is real. It is true. When you start going down the road of silencing free speech, you inevitably end up at a point in time where you're silencing people either for their opinions or religious beliefs or things like that, or just actually the truth, like factual things. You start silencing people. That when you hand that kind of power over to institutions, the institutions always abuse it. There is not a single instance in the history of humanity where the government, any government, anywhere in the world, has been given the authority to silence people where they didn't end up abusing that authority. They always abuse it. There's not a single example where they haven't abused it. And that is precisely why you have to have a universal protection for freedom of speech, which means giving people the ability to say things that are not true, giving people the ability to express opinions that you don't agree with, giving people the ability to say offensive things. It's not because we necessarily want people to lie or to cheat or to say offensive things. It's because if you go the opposite direction, you end up with just flat out authoritarianism. And that's what you're seeing in Brazil. That's what the left wants here for the United States of America. And it is precisely why Elon Musk is, whether you agree with him on everything or not, and I certainly don't, and nobody on this podcast agrees with him on everything, that's for sure. The guy has been a hero. He really has been a hero for free speech, and I think will go down in history as one of this generation's most important figures because of him standing up to governments like Brazil, like the United States, and saying, no, we are going to have at least one place on the internet that is guaranteed that people can express their opinions freely without being silenced. And he deserves so much credit for that, especially in light of the financial cost that it required for him to buy X and transform it and everything. Just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you, well, actually, first off, before I go to you, Chris, I do want to make a point that this is far different from the conversation about like banning TikTok, that have been going on for a little while. TikTok isn't repugnant because of people spreading misinformation. You'd have to ban every social media platform if that was your threshold. TikTok is repugnant because it's a Chinese-owned media platform that's designed to be corrosive to society, pushing horrible content to those of us that are like the most vulnerable to manipulation. So it's two different things between Brazil wanting to ban Twitter and the conversations about TikTok.
Well, also the TikTok is controlled by the CCP, and we have a little bit of a privacy concern with that. But just saying. Yeah.
So, Chris, you were one of the primary authors of the recently released "Socialism at a Glance" book, and that book kind of outlines socialism in practice across history, across a whole variety of different countries. But one of the hallmarks of pretty much every socialist regime is a crackdown on speech. So when this happens, I can't help but think that this is not actually from trying to protect people from hate or misinformation. This is just squarely an anti-free speech move from the Brazilian president. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, of course it is. So I want to go back to, I think it was probably like 2007-ish, the Arab Spring. Does anybody, do you guys remember that? How that was when social media really started to come of age. And I remember how many people across the world thought this is the greatest thing ever. Now, finally, people have this mechanism, this communication means to communicate without the gatekeepers, whether it's the mainstream media or the government, and how everyone thought this is the greatest thing ever. This is going to lead to, the end of authoritarianism and totalitarianism. And, it's going to, have just massive consequences, really empowering, people. But look what's happened. Big tech has become part of the problem. So they are now, working in conjunction, in coordination with governments to basically police the speech of the people who they were supposed to give this vast open platform to share their opinions and to share their, beliefs and to just say whatever they want to say. So it's just so sad that in, 15 years or so, social media has gone from being something that could really be used to add truth to power and to hold power accountable, because now it's been usurped by those powerful people, and now it's used against the people who were supposed to help in the first place. And that to me is just a really sad state of affairs.
Yeah, no kidding. That is a great point. So what has been the reaction to Elon's decision to stand up for free speech instead of giving into the demands of the Brazilian government? Surely, even those that disagree with Elon's political leanings can support his loyalty to the principles of free speech, right? Well, no. And in fact, in some cases, it's been quite the opposite. So the highest profile instance of people kind of coming to Brazil's side over this dispute is from former U.S. Congressman and former deputy chair of the DNC and current Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Ellison welcomed the news about Brazil banning Twitter by tweeting, I think in whatever language, a phrase that translates to "Thank you, Brazil." So, Jim, I mean, come on, like, I get it. The left doesn't like Elon Musk, but like, can't you just swallow that a little bit just to pretend that you're in favor of free speech? How have we gotten to this point?
They can't, because they're not, and they can't pretend. I mean, let's be clear about something. If you're advocating for someone to shut up, then you're not the good guy. Never. And under any circumstance, if you're in favor of censorship, are you the good guy? Censors are the bad guys every single time, right? And this is what Elon Musk is fighting against almost alone. People here in the chat have mentioned that, what's his name? Pavel Durov. Yeah, the CEO of Telegram. He was arrested, was it last week, in France, because his platform, which is encrypted and which he also shares Elon Musk's dedication to free speech, has allegedly been used for illicit activities, which I won't describe on this on this podcast, because it would get this. We already have enough trouble on our channel. It would just get it completely destroyed. So, but it's this idea that the CEO is responsible, that people are using his platform to message, to commit crimes, so that he is responsible, so he should go to jail. By that justification, the CEO of AT&T or Verizon or any cell company should also be sent to jail, because obviously criminals use cell phones. So Ryan Reynolds, if Mint Mobile is ever used to commit a crime under this justification, you also should be in prison. This is all absurd. And it is all, I say this a lot on this podcast. It all goes back to Trump being elected in 2016. The Democratic Party, once the champions of free speech, the American Civil Liberties Union, which used to have liberals, leftists, Democrats proudly hold their ACLU membership card up to the camera to tell people that they were lovers of liberty, not like those censors and prudes on the right. No, it is we, the liberals, who are in favor of free speech, because we understand the Constitution. We revere the Constitution, and especially the First Amendment, because without free speech, all your other freedoms are forfeit, really, at that point. Elon Musk believes this. He believes it so much that he spent $44 billion to buy a single social media company, which, frankly, is nothing in the larger scheme of things, as far as the volume of speech being done, or how much control you have. Google, its parent company Alphabet, has much more control over what people know, what people can know, through their search engines, through their suppression of anything that goes against the Democratic line. Google is vastly more powerful than X is. But Elon Musk is a big danger, because to a totalitarian, to a socialist, allowing any free speech is a threat. All of it is a threat. So again, if you're an American elected official and you are cheering for the suppression of speech in a, Brazil isn't an adversary, it's not maybe it's a bit of an ally, but it's a neutral country, then you are anti-American, you are anti-free speech, you want to destroy the Constitution, and you have no business being in any position of influence in an elected office anywhere in the United States, period. Because the censors are always the bad guys. It's what's really been troubling, and I know it troubles Chris and Justin as well, is that we see polling about the upcoming generations, Gen Z, and millennials, and they don't revere the First Amendment the way older generations do. They actually don't think free speech is all that important. And in fact, they think free speech is a hindrance to their happiness. This is very troubling, because without free speech, everything else is going to go, all of it. So this is extremely important. For newspapers to call for the arrest of Elon Musk, his arrest, take away his freedom, put him in jail for allowing people to speak. It really should be talked about more. But again, our media in this country, they think they are the only ones. The corporate media in America thinks they are the only ones for whom the First Amendment applies. For everybody else, it doesn't apply to you and me. And so we need to be shut up, lest anybody question the power and the agenda of the ruling regime.
Yeah, Elon Musk's response to Keith Ellison was pretty good. He retweeted it or whatever, saying the Democratic Party, the same one that used to defend the First Amendment, now wants to destroy the First Amendment. So this also comes on the heels of a recent slew of published op-eds calling for Elon Musk's arrest. Jim, you just kind of referenced that. One coming from the just detestable former U.S. Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich. I don't know how to pronounce. Yeah, who is more popular now for just giving absolute trash takes on Twitter every day. That's how I know him. But he wrote a piece that was published in The Guardian titled "Elon Musk is out of control. Here's how to rein him in." So it talks about basically the whole first 2/3 of the article is just all of his problems that he has with Elon Musk. But then it goes into the suggested actions that people can take to stop Elon Musk. The first one, boycott Tesla. The second one, boycott X. The third one, this one's the one that got my attention. He writes, quote, Regulators around the world should threaten Musk with arrest if he doesn't stop disseminating lies and hate on X. So, I mean, Reich is not a socialist leader. He's more of a socialist loser. But his statements also seem to be dripping with that same authoritarian tendencies and desperation of some of the other socialist leaders that we've been talking about. Justin, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, this just seems like, if somebody told me that an article like this would have been written a handful of years ago, I don't think I would have believed them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in the wake of Donald Trump winning in 2016, everything changed for the left in the way that they communicate. Prior to 2016, there were a lot of people on the right who suspected and openly said, based on a lot of evidence that had happened over many decades, that the left really doesn't support free speech, doesn't really support individual liberty. They are inherently collectivists to the core, that there is a wing of the Democrat Party that does not feel that way, but that the base is becoming increasingly more authoritarian. And we'd been talking about that for a long time, but then 2016 happened and it became very, very clear. It all came out into the open because the hatred of Donald Trump and the fear of what Trump might do to the systems of power was so high that they just couldn't help themselves anymore. They felt like they had to take the next step. Then things got even worse after Donald Trump won, and you get to 2017, 2018, and it became, we weren't hard enough on Donald Trump during the election. We should have been even harder on him. That's the only reason he won. And they started cracking down even more. And then, of course, COVID happened, and that gave them even more justification to become authoritarians. And now they're not just limiting people's free speech, although they did do that during COVID. They're now, throwing people in jail for holding church services. And it's just gone completely off the rails. And this tendency was there for a while. It's been there. But they weren't always as open about it. And now they're just very out in the open. Like, what do we want to do? We want to put the collective first. We want to put elites in charge of society who know better. Not all elites, because Elon Musk is an elite, but only the elites, and Donald Trump's an elite, but only the elites that we agree with. We want to put them in charge of society. They're going to manage things. The rest of society is a bunch of stupid sheep, and they're going to be led by us, the shepherds. And if they don't want to adhere to our rules and the rules-based order of the world, then we're going to silence you. We're going to ruin your life. We're going to throw you in jail, or all three. Okay, and or other things, right? Like this is the approach the left has taken since 2016, and a lot of people who used to consider themselves on the left have realized this and are now distancing themselves from it. Not nearly enough people, but Elon Musk is one of those people. That's the most incredible thing about all of this, is Elon Musk is not like a libertarian conservative or anything like that. He voted for Barack Obama. He's a liberal, but more of a classic liberal, in the sense that he supports individual rights and free speech and stuff like that, but he also supports some government programs and social safety nets and expanding those and doing things like that. He supports both. And that used to be normal in the Democrat Party, and now it's not. Now you have to be silencing the other side. You have to be advocating for the destruction of individual rights. And if you're not, then you're part of the problem and you need to be destroyed too. And that's like that's Bill Maher, that's Elon Musk, that's RFK Jr. I would put into that camp, because in my opinion, he's a liberal. Like, all of those kinds of people now have to be destroyed or thrown in jail, even because they're not towing the party line anymore. Right. Because the party line is becoming so authoritarian that they don't feel comfortable going along with it. And it does make you wonder, at what point, like, they're openly trying to put their political opponent in jail.
Right.
They're openly calling for people who they used to consider heroes to be thrown in jail for free because of violating free speech norms in their minds. Like, everybody now who doesn't agree with their social view of the world which is basically was the normal social view of the world for pretty much everyone in 2016, 2015, 2014. If you don't agree with them on, LGBTQ stuff and trans stuff and whatever, then you're like the most bigoted person who needs to be silenced. If you don't think that Israel should be wiped off the face of the map, same thing, right? Like it's gone so far off. How long is it going to take for the average person to say, I'm sorry, I don't maybe like Republicans, but I can't be part of that? I mean, that's nuts. That's completely crazy. I'm amazed that it hasn't happened already, to be honest. It's sad that it hasn't happened already, because we are reaching the point of no return here rapidly. The next step is actually putting the people in jail that you keep saying you want to put in jail.
Sure.
And once we get there, it's all done. You don't have a free society anymore, and we're nearly there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't expect Brazil to be the only country that's going to be pushing Elon to do this to the extent that they're pushing him to do this. So, especially when you've got people in the West that are celebrating it, expect to see a whole bunch of different countries doing the same thing. But one more story that I want to talk about here, and this comes from good old North Korea, where dictator Kim Jong-un has reportedly ordered 30 government officials to be executed after deadly floods ravaged their country. So this past summer, there's been a rash of flooding in North Korea that have left thousands dead. So what's the dear leader's response to reestablish trust with the affected communities? Killing a bunch of bureaucrats that were in charge of those areas, of course. So Kim has toured the affected areas in recent weeks, stating that those exaggerating the extent of the damage from the floods are just taking part in a smear campaign and trying to provoke the government. So, I mean, Chris, I'm going to go back to you on this one because you kind of wrote the book on the socialist regimes and whatnot. But this one just seems... it's like it's harder to scapegoat, the opposition party when you have full supremacy in your country. So what do? Hang some bureaucrats from the gallows, apparently. What are your thoughts on this story?
Well, I'm very confused because according to Juche socialism as practiced in North Korea, the Kim family are gods who descended from heaven to rule the country. So if they're gods who descended from heaven to rule the country, how come they can't actually have any power over flooding or not? It kind of doesn't really make sense. But given that it, is the fact that he went through and executed, another 30 members. I mean, this is pretty much par for the course for socialist regimes, purges. When Kim Jong-un came to power, he engaged in thousands of people being purged. Actually, they sometimes would put them in stadiums, anti-aircraft guns to kill them, to show the people like this is what happens if you don't really just abide by our doctrine. So yeah, this is just kind of normal for the Hermit Kingdom. This is what they do. No one takes responsibility for the bureaucratic mess ups that probably led to this, and instead he just goes in and does another purge, and then just thinks that things are going to take care of themselves. So it's really sad because the North Korean people have been suffering under this family regime for almost 70 years. And, they deserve so much better than this. My niece just went to South Korea. My sister's from China and she also went to South Korea. And they, showed me all these pictures of how glorious life is. And they went close to the border, not too close. And I told them, please do not get too close. But they did take some pictures, and you can just see how different it is on the other side of that, of the 39th parallel there. It's just a completely different world. And it's really sad because there are families who are stuck in North Korea and they don't want to be there. They want to, reunite with their families in South Korea, or if their families have emigrated to the United States, since the communist government, was founded in late 1940s, they're stuck there. They have no way of getting out. It is a prison camp. It is a prison camp of a country. The statistics speak for themselves. The rate of poverty, the rate of malnutrition, the human suffering, the horrible death camps. It is just sickening that this is still happening in 2024. And this is what, when you give someone complete control over a country, which the Kim family has had now for, 3 generations, this is what you get.
Yeah, one of the ways that dictators like this kind of retain their supremacy over a population over a given amount of time is to try to instigate this idea of like infallibility, right? So it's just like if they can't fail, they're the leaders, all of that sort of stuff. So anything that happens that kind of shows that there's a that they bleed blood or something, that they're not a god, that runs against that narrative, that painting, that veneer that they're trying to retain supremacy with. So when a flood like this happens, you would think that would lead to somebody being like, why didn't our like godly figures take care of that? Like that question that you kind of pose half mockingly at the beginning of what you were saying, Chris. And the way to deal with that is to do exactly what good old dear leader did, which is deny that it was actually that bad and to claim that people that are exaggerating the extent of the floods were just, taking part in a smear campaign, and cracking down with just absolute iron fist and just murdering a bunch of people. Because if there was some issue and some communities did get swept away, it wasn't just because of some failings of this or that we're going to try to fix or whatever. No, it was because of something so bad that they needed to be executed. So to see this regime taking these actions because of flooding or whatever is just, again, another one of these hallmarks of a socialist, authoritarian, communist regime, whatever you want to call it. Jim, thoughts on this story?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thoughts on this, actually, I want to take it to, I guess it applies to it. But Justin, when did we start officially the Socialism Research Center at the Heartland Institute? What year was that?
So that was right after AOC. So that would have been 2019. The
Right.
website stuff was built probably in 2018.
Right. Okay. And so, yeah. And when we started that, we started some of our first academic work were things like examining kind of the so-called soft socialism countries like Sweden and Scandinavia, and warning that it's actually not even warning about it, but just saying that it's not all it's cracked up to be. But we were pointing out that pointing to those countries, friendly, bright, fun countries like in Scandinavia, that's the socialist future that the left in this country were pointing to kind of sell it to the American people. And what we found since then is amazing, is that that soft sell isn't would you agree that soft sell isn't really used anymore? That we're now at a part where we are where media and politicians are basically either excusing the socialist excesses of places like Venezuela and even North Korea, and openly wishing it for the United States, because you can't have a society like North Korea if you have free speech. You can't. But we're supposedly live in the enlightened West, and we have the same sorts of attempts to control free speech happening on an accelerating scale in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain. They are arresting people for posting social media posts that hurt people's feelings. Legit, that is what's happening. And so if that's happening in Great Britain, how long until it happens here? It's not even a matter, I don't think, of if. I think if we continue going down this road, it's a matter of when that starts to happen. And because we already have a media in this country that they don't even report news anymore. They just parrot the lines of the regime and try to push that out there as truth. They set up fact check websites to fight disinformation, which is defined as just anybody disagreeing with the leftist viewpoint of the world. That is all disinformation. And even in the thing we talked about here in the beginning, the so-called, the tenant media and the Russian financial backing of it, and how that's a violation of FAIR laws and all this other kind of stuff. In the beginning of the indictment, my antenna went up, because our Department of Justice just declared that what was broadcast out on Tenet Media was Russian propaganda and disinformation. They didn't even bother to actually highlight very much, if anything at all, what exactly was that disinformation and Russian propaganda. And we are now living in a society here in the supposedly free United States where our government, high elected officials, and our supposed free and independent media in this country, which is actually just a corporate blob, are all defining what disinformation and misinformation is. We've had shows on this podcast about the supposedly now defunct agency that was going to be in the federal government to police, to find, expose, and silence so-called disinformation. We have the Twitter files in which Elon Musk was able to release after spending $44 billion to do it, that exposed the conspiracy, a real one, not a theory, a real conspiracy of action between our federal government and the people who control speech on Twitter to make sure that anything that went against the regime's line on topics from the election to COVID to anything else were suppressed, and that those accounts were taken down. So we already, in a large sense, we don't live in North Korea. We're not starving and eating our shoes and watching our children wither away and die in this country. But we are living in an increasingly authoritarian regime when it comes to speech. If you are policing speech, again, if you are the censor, if your instinct is to censor, you are the bad guy. If you are against people speaking what they have in their hearts, whether or not you agree, and even if they are objectively wrong about it, if you're against that, you're the bad guy and you are un-American. And so when we started the Socialism Research Center at the Heartland Institute, it was kind of exposing more in an economic way, kind of economically how and why socialism doesn't work. And now, in a very short amount of time, we are increasingly having to talk about how socialism leads to ultimately tyranny and authoritarianism. And it's accelerating very, very fast. I still thought, 3 or 4 years down the line, we'd still be talking about how socialized healthcare sucks and why. And instead, we're talking about the very basic principles of a free society that are slipping through our fingers at an accelerating rate.
Yeah, no, those are quaint times when we were talking about the idea of socialized healthcare. Quaint times. Also note, corporate blob is also the nickname of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. So I just wanted to point that out. But Justin, Chris, any final words on any of this? We're already 7 minutes long in the podcast, but if you have any insightful things to say, now would be the time.
No, I'm good.
All right. Hearing nothing, I will wrap up the show. I want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Join us every week for a new episode. Those audio-only listeners that are catching the show probably on a Friday or later, why don't you leave a review for us on iTunes? That would be greatly appreciated. Also, consider joining us a day earlier at Thursdays at noon, where we live stream this on Facebook and YouTube, Rumble, and X. Not X in Brazil, so you have to find us a different way if you're a Brazilian watcher of the show. But you can support the show by not giving us super chats because we have been demonetized on YouTube. But you can support the show by going to heartland.org/inthetank and directly support the show that way. Or you can help us out just by hitting that like button, sharing this content, subscribing if you haven't already, or just leaving a comment under the video. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. If you'd like, you can follow us on X at InTheTankPod. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on X, at J Lakely on X. What did I usually say? Forget.
I don't know.
Because I was trying to say, come to our benefit dinner on September 13th. Tickets are still available. You can see me and everybody else here on this podcast there. It's in Chicago. Go to heartland.org for more info.
Fantastic. Chris Talgo, what do you have to pitch today?
Well, it's a big weekend here in Chicago. The Bears are about to start their Super Bowl run. I think they're going to win probably 10 in a row with Caleb Williams as the all-time greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL. And, Donnie, as you and I have been discussing many times, the White Sox are just having an awesome season. So we got to keep that losing streak going. Come on, guys.
No, they won last night.
I know, but we got to start a new losing streak. Come on. What are they doing winning?
I know. I got 21 games to
So annoyed.
Justin Haskins, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Twitter. And I don't go to Facebook. And Twitter doesn't exist anymore. Go to x.com at Justin T. Haskins and go to stoppingsocialism.com as well. A lot of great stuff bashing socialism there. You can also go to Amazon or wherever you buy your books and find Socialism at a Glance, as well as Socialism is Evil, a book that I wrote way back in 2018, talking about socialism and the moral case against Karl Marx and the views that he had. So all kinds of great videos that Donnie and I did on the Stopping Socialism TV channel on YouTube that talk about socialism and all of its facets and the history of that and all the chaos and destruction of it. Venezuela, we've talked about that endlessly. So a lot of great older videos on there if you're interested in this topic.
Yep. Also, want to thank Andy, producer, in the background. But thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.
Turn that off.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.